I want to start talking about validation and handling error cases. I'm going to start here. I've got this add user method, which obviously has got a form, gets some data from the form. So one obvious thing that you will probably be doing is checking to see if maybe they've entered some blank or invalid data when they shouldn't, and then you manage that. You could flash an error message at them. You definitely don't want to do all of the data stuff, so you have to look at the flow of your program and make sure you don't insert this blank user, even though you give them an error message. Whatever, that's just standard stuff using the tools that you know already. Um, Beyond that, there's exception handling. So there are some circumstances where you will potentially get an error that is out of your control. For instance, when you're doing file handling or database access, then the file system might go away or the database might go away. And it's good manners to not just present the user with some ugly internal message saying internal server error or whatever. It's better if you can handle it. So here's an example. I've done I think I'm uploading the image here, and I tried to save this to a particular location. And I've added in a very specific typo there. It should be static. I've added the typo. And what it's going to do is going to try to do that. And if it succeeds, no problem, carries on from down here. However, if this throws an error, it jumps to this except. And this except can do whatever you want. And in my case, I've said, well, it tried to save it. Let's just go with this blank.png. There's lots of different things that you could do down here. You could do the same as this, just give an error message and skip everything. Or you could just fail the whole application. Who knows? There's lots of different things. I've chosen to do this one, which is probably not a particularly good thing to do. Anyway, now that's all well and good. Sometimes you might have an issue with that you get an error and you don't see it, and you keep getting these blank.pngs and you can't work out what the problem is. So what we can do is we can actually handle that error and see what's going on with it as well. So if I go here, exception as E, not a great variable name, but we'll go with it for now. That E is now the error, and I can print it out. I need to convert it to a string, and if I hit go on this one now and try and add a user, I haven't done anything with the blank, so I'm not going to bother. Choose a file, find a file, an image, delete movie.png. That's the one. Submit. So it didn't do anything. I remember why. That's because I've also got another error later on, which I'm going to show you in just a second. But we can see up here, it says no such file or directory. So there's a big fat clue right there, and I can look and see if it's got static, not static. So let's go back to where we were. Stop that. Change that to static. And now let's look at the next error. I did a bit of foreshadowing there. So as I said before, we can have errors when we're doing database stuff. This is where we need to be a little bit careful. You'll see why in a moment. So I'm trying to execute my SQL, and so these are the two things that do the direct access to the database. And again, it could have an error. There could be something where there's a value in here which is not allowed. So I'll have an except. And I've got that same exception as E to print that string. So if I hit play on that, we'll see the error when I do it. Have user choose file. Actually, it doesn't matter if I choose a file or not, does it? Because we're just going to go submit. And then we're still going to get that same error, which is users.tlb users does not exist. So our typical issue that I see day in, day out is a typo, TBL, not TLB. Right, great. So I have tried to do that and it has failed. This is quite useful and important because If you do a try and then you don't do much in the accept, it can just fail silently. And this can be very confusing, I find, for some students, particularly this SQL thing. If you just do try to commit it to the database and then you just swallow those exceptions without giving any kind of information, then you get a different error somewhere else typically, and you can't work out why that error is happening in code that looks to be perfectly fine and is perfectly fine. So sometimes I even take off this error handling completely. So I'll just like hashtag, 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 and then shift out these back and so on. Anyway, not doing that right now because I also want to show you this finally going on. So the idea of the finally is this happens whether this failed or not. So if you tried that and it worked just fine, no problem. It goes to the finally, does this, and then carries on. If you tried this and it failed, it goes to the exception, and then it does this, and then carries on. So in this case, what I put in the finally, I didn't want to leave my connection to the database just hanging. It's just bad practice to have lots of connections open to the database. Eventually things are going to slow down or fail or whatever. So that's why we would use a finally. One last example of a try catch I've put in somewhere down here. Yeah. So this was on its own originally. So this would have been just up here like that without any try catch. And potentially it could cause an issue. So going back to my application, I could put in here /update instead of clicking on the link, which is what you're supposed to do, because when you click on the link, you get user ID equals 2 or user ID equals 3, whatever. But the user could potentially just type in the /update. So in the code, as you can see, I've said do an accept on that. So that's a quick pause while I sneezed. So I'm doing an accept, try accept, and in this case, this is a forbidden error. So that's one thing you can do. Good. So this is part of what we should be doing, could be doing. All right. So the try accept tool is really, really helpful. You should be using it if you're doing validation. You can have client-side validation, of course. You can have that your browser is doing validation, but often that will be through JavaScript, and potentially the user could have turned off JavaScript. There's all kinds of reasons why you don't trust the client. You do validation server-side as well as validation on the client as well. And there are libraries. What we'll look at later on is this WT Forms, which has got all of the validation stuff built into it. It's not 100% intuitive to use straight away, but I think it would be a good idea if we did a bit of this with this stage, and then when we come to be doing the later parts of our project, potentially then we could be using WT Forms. Okay, so hopefully that's given you all the tools that you need to be validating and checking your database access is not got errors and such like. Good.